Coming at number 10, we have Te-Ka. I mean, going from a massive island covered in foliage and beauty and then changing into a huge fire monster that everyone is afraid of sounds like a curse to me. If you don't remember, Te-Ka was the antagonist from the movie Moana, one of the biggest Disney hits in recent years that has the legend of all legends in it, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. In the movie, Te-Feti is an island goddess who wants to bring good to the world, but then The Rock's character Maui, a demigod who has a massive hooked weapon, sneaks in so he can steal her heart. And not in a good way. He physically removes her heart from this god so he can use the magical powers. As you can imagine, having your heart ripped out of your chest by some dude who just snuck in to steal it probably would leave you in a bad mood. She becomes a living volcano that lays waste to everything around her. That's until her heart is returned to her and she can become her lush green self once again. And guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the little notification bell, and stick around until the end of this list because I'm going to be reading out some questions from my Instagram inbox. Coming in at number 9, we have Princess and the Frog. This would suck. I don't know how many of you out there have seen Princess and the Frog, but this movie has one of the worst curses in movie history. So in this movie, you have Naveen, who is a young hunk just wandering around the world, as handsome as anyone could be. And then you have Lawrence, who is a little toadstool of a man who really would like to know what it feels like to have the body of a young NFL superstar. Well, then Lawrence finds a voodoo doctor who will give him his dream. A deal is struck and the voodoo doctor turns Lawrence into an exact copy of Naveen. But now there's a problem. You can't have two rock solid hunks walking through the world, especially when they're mere copies of each other. So the voodoo witch doctor turns Naveen into a frog, probably one of the worst animals you could ever get turned into. You're so low on the food chain, you're all slimy and slippery, and you gotta eat bugs, and sometimes French people will try to boil you in a pot. But on top of all this, Naveen has to watch his body walk off and ruin his hunky image while he's stuck in a frog body. That's horrible. Coming in at number 8, we have Kania. I mean, there could be worse fates. I don't know how many of you have seen Brother Bear, but in this movie, the main character Kania makes a huge mistake and kills a bear, and the spirits don't like this. Now there is a bear missing from the force, and Kania must take its place so that it will bring balance to the force and teach this dude a lesson. But as I said before, there could be worse things that could happen in the world. Bears are a pretty dominant force in nature, so you wouldn't be preyed on by too many other things other than humans. Also, you get to sleep for half the year. When you wake up, you have all the fish and food you want to eat, and you can just eat as much as you want. You get to get as fat as possible. Then you find a mate, you mate, maybe you fight a couple times, and then when you're all plump and satisfied, you head back to your hole to sleep until next year, and you miss the whole winter, which is the worst part of the year anyways. I mean, that kind of sounds better than hanging out in an office with a vitamin D lamp blasting in your face so you don't feel tired all day. Coming in at number 7, we have Sleeping Beauty. This is probably the most famous curse of any Disney movie. You have the beautiful princess in Sleeping Beauty. It's her birthday, like literally it's the day she is born. The king sends out an invitation to everyone in the kingdom to come see his new little girl. All the fairy godmothers come some nights. Literally everyone is invited except for Maleficent. She gets pretty salty that she never got an invite to this big day, so she shows up anyways and puts a curse on the poor baby. You have to be pretty ice cold to put a curse on a baby. On her 18th birthday, she would fall asleep and never wake up. And sure enough, on this girl's 18th birthday, she pricks her finger and then she falls into a coma. Then of course the prince comes in, he goes to Maleficent's castle, he kills the witch, and then the day is saved. Yay! What if Sleeping Beauty woke up after all of that and she was like, thanks for doing that, but I really just like you as a friend. Coming in at number 6, we have Cusco. Being turned into a llama doesn't sound like the best day of your life. I mean, there are a lot of animals that it would be cool to get turned into, like a shark or an eagle, but I don't think llama would be high on my list of things to come back as. In the movie, we have Cusco, who is a fun-loving, groovy emperor, and then you have Yasma, who wants to take the throne of the emperor, so she sets up a plan for him to be killed, to be poisoned. This is a classic move for when someone is trying to usurp you, but the plan gets messed up. It leads to the emperor actually getting turned into a llama. He loses his royal status, but along the way he learns how to be a better person and eventually gets his groove back, which actually doesn't involve eating grass and spitting. Next on the list we have Jafar, one of the best Disney villains of all time. The sorcerer who has his eyes set on the kingdom of Agrabah. He wants all the power in the world and he'll do just about anything to get it. But here's the thing, Jafar doesn't want to just rule a kingdom. He wants to be an all-powerful being. And he gets so close, but then he makes a little mistake. Eventually, Jafar gets his hand on the genie lamp and he wishes not to be the ruler of Agrabah, but to be an all-powerful genie himself. Seems like a smart move. You'll have unlimited magical power. But he forgets to ask to be a free genie. So then he gets the power, but he's now locked away in his own lamp, and the only way he can have his freedom from this lamp will be if someone wishes for him to be free. You were so close, dude. Just changing your wish a little bit would have changed your life so much. But now you're stuck in a lamp, and I don't think you're gonna get out anytime soon. Next on the list we have Ariel. Now she did sign up for this curse, but this girl was a little too young and dumb to know what she was getting herself into. We all know the story of a little mermaid. She's living in a kingdom under the sea. She's a princess. She's literally in the 1%, but of course she wants more. Standard rich kid. Well, this Disney princess decides that she will throw everything away to try and chase some love. But the person she's in love with isn't just any dude, but a surface dweller. So she trades her voice for some legs and tries to woo the prince of her dreams. Little did she know that the person she sold her voice to, Ursula, was setting her up so she could take her daddy's trident and control the ocean. Also, not being able to speak sounds like a pretty horrible curse. Next on the list we have the Beast. Curses don't really get any worse than this. You're a king, you're royalty, you're living the high life. Another case of rich kid who doesn't know how to act right because wealth has separated them from the rest of the world. Well, if we dive into the story of Beauty and the Beast was a young boy, and one day a traveler comes to his door and asks if they can spend the night in their castle. He rejects the traveler, and it turns out that the traveler is a witch, and she curses him and everyone in the castle. The prince becomes a horrible beast, and all of the other people who work for him get transformed into living odds and ends around the house. To go from a king to a monster is a pretty hard change. And to cap things off, if he wants to get changed back, he needs to convince someone to fall in love with his beastly self before the final petal falls off a magical rose. My God. Coming in at number 2, we have Hercules. This would suck big time. You're a god, and then you have your godly powers taken away from you because your uncle is feeling a little sour. The gods are so petty. Just let me live, bro. I'm a baby. I never did anything to you. If you don't know, Hercules was born and then stolen from his crib and then forced to drink a spell that would change him mortal. Now, it almost worked, but he didn't drink the last drop, so he kept his godly strength. But now he couldn't come back to Olympus because even though he was insanely strong, he was now mortal, and no mortal can live in Olympus. So he must walk the earth wondering who he's supposed to be. Then he eventually learns that he was meant to walk among the gods, and he goes on a quest to get his rightful seat by his father's side on the mountain of the gods. But finding out that you're supposed to grow up living the life of an almighty being, tasting ambrosia, never needing to worry about anything, and literally being a god, but you were cursed to be mortal, being a god amongst men is probably how Joey Chestnut must feel.
God, it's too much. So much.
There's only one thing that I can think of that would be worse than that. For the number 1 spot, we have Monsieur Toilette. Disney has been going out of their way to remake a lot of the Disney classic movies and turn them into live action films. And for the most part, they've been pretty close to the original movies, but there is one part from the live action Beauty and the Beast that is horrifying. So we all know the story of Beauty and the Beast. We have covered it a little already. You got a castle full of people who are cursed. One of them got turned into a beast, and the rest of them got turned into different items around the house. Some of the people are teapots, some of the people are candelabras, but one dude had the worst fate of all. In the deleted scenes from the live action Beauty and the Beast, we see that there is someone who got cursed with being the toilet. That's right, for however long these people were stuck in this state, one dude just had people poop inside him. My god, that is a curse so horrible you would think it would be in an Eli Roth movie.
Starting off this countdown, we have the Smellitizer. Disneyland sees about 18 million guests per year. Disney World sees about 58 million guests per year. That is an insane amount of people. Now, what if I told you that Disneyland mind controls its guests? I wish I was making this up, but I am not. So Disney uses a device known as the Smellitizer. Basically, it's a device used to pump fumes throughout the park. For example, at the main entrance, they pump out the smell of popcorn to entice you to buy some. In candy shops or ice cream parlors, it will smell sweet like vanilla. They also do this to make their rides more immersive. Like at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it will smell like wet wood and sea salt. They are literally controlling what you smell. If that's not a form of mind control, then tell me what is. In our 9th spot, we have the monorail. So at Disney World in Florida, they have a public transit system known as the monorail. Basically, it allows guests to travel free between locations associated with Disney. However, in 2009, a 21-year-old monorail driver lost his life while on the job. He was transporting the last batch of guests for the night when another monorail came speeding towards him. They got into a head-on crash that took his life. After investigating the issue, it was discovered that the crash was entirely Disney's fault. They violated a number of safety protocols and even got fined for this. Coming in at number 8, we have the People Mover. The People Mover ride was a transport attraction that opened up at Tomorrowland at Disneyland, California in 1967. Basically, you would board a small train that would take you on a ride above Tomorrowland from above. However, a month after the ride opened, a 16-year-old boy tripped and fell onto the track. The oncoming train crushed him and dragged his body for a few hundred feet before stopping. That was just a month after opening. But sadly, it's not the only accident that happened. In 1972, a teen fell 30 feet to the ground from the tracks. As a result, she broke her arm, hip, and pelvis. She ended up suing Disney. Then in 1980, another male was crushed and killed by this ride. Over the years, there have been tons of lawsuits from people who have gotten injured on this ride. In our 7th spot, we have the injuries. The Disney mascot actors go through a lot. And I mean a lot. Not only do they have to wear those heavy costumes in the heat, but they also have to deal with whiny children and a bunch of Karens. But what you may not know is that Disney mascots often get seriously injured while on duty. A woman playing Mickey Mouse suffered a bad neck injury after a guest kept patting her head, which caused the head to fall down and strain her neck. The costumes themselves weigh around 47 pounds. They are blamed for at least 282 injuries. Not only that, but they are often touched inappropriately by the guests. A lot of workers have filed police reports because guests would grope or touch them inappropriately. It's not the kids though, it's the adults. A Disney princess had a 51-year-old man grab her breasts. He was arrested and then charged with battery. In another case, the actor portraying Donald Duck got grabbed inappropriately in certain areas by an older woman. Those poor mascots go through so much. Making our way down the list, number 6, we have the creepers. It's scary, but a park full of children attracts the wrong kind of people. Over the years, Disney has had a real problem with predators at the park. And I don't know what kind of background checks that Disney is doing on their employees, but obviously they aren't thorough enough. Because over the years, a number of park employees have been arrested after being inappropriate with the park guests. Since 2002, 42 employees have been arrested because of this. That's way too many people. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the freaky business. So apparently a lot of people like to get it on at Disney World. Author Leonard Kinsey highlights this in the book The Dark Side of Disney. Basically, he describes the truth about Disney and exposes all their dirty little secrets. So apparently a lot of people have in the companion restroom. It's a single room with a toilet and sink for anyone that wants a little extra privacy, or for anyone that wants to get a little spicy. Like really, come on guys, keep it together. Apparently a lot of people try to get it on during rides as well. If you're caught though, you get the boot right away. You get the boot and no booty. In our 4th spot, we have the chef suit. So in 2010 at Disneyland Paris, 2 chefs committed. Apparently, the working conditions weren't the best. One of the chefs apparently became depressed after the food at the park switched from freshly made to frozen. His note read, and I quote, "I don't want to work for Mickey anymore." This seems like an urban legend, but I swear I'm not making this up. The other chef apparently took his own life because of humiliating treatment at work. Then in 2013, another employee tried to take his own life by setting himself on fire. That's crazy. Coming in at number 3, we have the deaths. So Disney claims that no one has ever died at their park. Clearly that's not true. Like, I just finished talking about all the people that have died at their parks. So it turns out what Disney does is when someone does die at the park, employees have to remove the dead body from the property before pronouncing them dead. That means no one technically died at the park, only outside of the park's gates or wherever they were. They do this so that all the families feel safe coming there. I mean, the park must be super safe if no deaths have ever occurred there. Very sneaky, Disney. Very sneaky. Moving on at number 2, we have the workers' deaths. So that's not the only crazy rule that Disney has. They also have a rule as to what should happen if a mascot or character actor gets injured or dies there. No matter what happens, they have to stay in character. Once they are out of the public's eye, that's when they can receive medical attention. For example, one worker was told before accepting a job as Water Goofy on a Disney cruise, he had to agree that in an event he started drowning, he had to be carried away before lifeguards remove his costume and perform CPR. So he could literally be dying in the costume and need medical attention right away, but Disney won't allow it. And in our number 1 spot, we have the cover-up. This is by far one of the biggest cover-ups made by Disney. So on December 24th, 1998, 2 park guests and an employee were involved in a bad accident on the sailing ship Columbia ride. A heavy metal cleat became loose and hit the guests and employee. One of the guests died and his wife was hospitalized. But Disney failed to notify the police. When they were called to the scene, Disney cleaned up the mess as quickly as possible before the police arrived. They also refused to let in outside medical personnel. They were afraid that this would frighten the park guests. 2 things they shouldn't have done. They got a hefty fine as a result of this and were taken to court.
Coming in at number 10, we have Nessus the River Guardian's penis in Hercules. I get a cartoon bump on the head, but this is a bit much. In one scene of Disney's Hercules, he gets into a scrap with the River Guardian Nessus. Hercules punches Nessus in the air, and when he lands, he's hit in the head with his horseshoes. This gives him a huge bump. However, this huge bump ends up looking like a huge erect penis with a very, very visible ballsack to boot. As a kid, I didn't see this at all, but as an adult, I'm like, hello there, sir, what is on your head? More penises at number 9, this time edible ones. Hannah Montana, what are you flogging there? Disney's Hannah Montana had a load of marketing material to promote alongside one of the movies. This also included what they called concert candy. Alongside an image of Miley holding a microphone to her mouth were some really light skin colored gummies in dubious shapes. Pretty phallic, really. She's like this, and then there's a packet of cocks. Literally, a bag of dicks. I think that these would be best served at a bachelorette rather than a kids SingStar party, but that's just me. I can't believe I'm about to say this, but check out these butt beads in Cinderella at number 8. What are these cheeky mice up to? Whatever it is, I'm not sure that it belongs in a Disney movie. What was an innocent scene with Cinderella's rodent friends Gus and Jack looks pretty dodgy when you pause it. A bead necklace is broken and Jack is trying to collect some of the beads on Gus's tail. However, without context, this still image looks like Jack is ramming some beads up Gus's bottom. Peter Pan's schlong is coming in at number 7. In one scene, Peter Pan is dancing around with his irksome shadow, and I don't know how to say this, but he's showing some signs of not being a child anymore, right there. Wow. Here's a still image, and here's a gif of the moment. It's like, surprise, here's my penis, which is really, really inappropriate because he's supposed to be a very young teenager. Just like, put it away, Pan. Coming into number 6, we have the much debated Sex in the Sky in Lion King. At one moment in Disney's The Lion King, Simba flops down on Pride Rock, and it looks like the stars spell out sex. The official line is that yes, the stars do spell something, but it's supposed to say SFX amongst the production team. However, many people are convinced that it says sex, and when you see it, it's really hard to unsee. Another Lion King offering at number 5, we have these boobalicious sand dunes. In one scene, Zazu is taking Nala and Simba to a watering hole, but in the background, there's a palm tree and some sand dunes, except those sand dunes without a shadow of a doubt look like they've been drawn to look like boobs. I mean, there they are, the lovely lady humps. Look for yourself. I think that you can achieve sand dunes without adding dark spots in the middle. That is a nip if ever I saw one. Disney isn't even trying to make these boobs subliminal. Get a load of this harpy from Fantasia. She's nude, she's angry, she has pert breasts. I never noticed this woman as a child, but as an adult, I mean, I'm all for freeing the nip, but whoa, they're Disney. More naked ladies at number 3, we have Esmeralda dancing naked in flames in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Sexually repressed Frollo imagines a naked Esmeralda as he sings about hellfire. He clearly wants her, but she is not up for it at all, so he gets pretty angry and pretty vengeful. He imagines her dancing in flames, but at one point she's clothed, then at another, she definitely isn't. Hello there, nude Disney character. This is more than a little disturbing. We have the minister's erection in Ariel the Little Mermaid coming in at number 2. As Eric is under Ursula's spell and they're about to get married, the minister gets a little overexcited. Why? Why did they draw that bump? I don't know what we're supposed to think. Some people say it's a knee, but I'm like, maybe from his 3rd leg. Woohoo! Finally, at number 1, I just can't see this. Absolute bum alert. Bum. We have this cheeky bum in the Lion King poster. Here is the Lion King poster. Totally fine. But wait. When you look a bit closer, it really does look like a sexy lady's backside. And she's there, ready, with a pert butt. See? Yeah, you won't be able to unsee that.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the missing mothers. Have you ever noticed that a lot of characters in Disney movies don't have mothers? Or if they do, something bad happens to the mothers in the film? Like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, or Snow White, or Bambi, which is truly one of the most tragic examples that I can think of. I never really noticed this trend until it was pointed out to me, but it's honestly very common in Disney movies and had me wondering, what was up with that? Well, there is a theory that this morbid trend is due to the fact that Walt Disney himself had bought a home for his parents to move into. After moving in, the furnace had a leak and it unfortunately affected both of his parents and actually led to his mother passing away. An extremely tragic situation that Walt refused to talk about after. Many people believe that he felt guilty for the incident since he purchased the house for them, but of course it was not his fault at all. It's very possible that this real life trauma he experienced just ended up bleeding into his work. In our number 9 spot today, we have Walt's last words. In 1966, Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer after being a lifelong smoker, and he passed away not too long after. We always hear famous last words from people that are either inspiring or just downright terrifying, but Walt's last words were just strange. Walt was unfortunately unable to speak due to the condition of his lungs, so his last words were actually written. The last words were Kurt Russell. I wish I could tell you this super interesting story about Kurt, but he was actually just a child actor at the time of Walt's passing. Kurt did voice work, but he also starred in a few movies. Unfortunately, no one really knows why Kurt was on Walt's mind in his final moments, and unless Kurt knows something that he isn't telling us, we will probably never know. In our number 8 spot today, we have a Toy Story connection. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up button if you're enjoying the video so far, because it really helps us out. Toy Story is an absolute classic that is well loved by many. I mean, what kid hasn't imagined their toys coming to life behind closed doors? It honestly is the dream. One little known thing about Toy Story though is its creepy connection. In the Toy Story movies there are quite a few subtle references to the movie The Shining. Definitely not what I would have expected. I'm not exactly sure why this connection exists, but it does. In the scene where Woody and Buzz Lightyear are trying to escape from Sid's house, that carpet is the same one as the one in the Overlook Hotel from The Shining. Also, the number 237, which is a terrifying room in The Shining, is repeatedly seen throughout the Toy Story franchise. There are even more connections as well, such as the way the scoring for the movie is set up, which was inspired by, you guessed it, The Shining. And in Toy Story 3, the Sunnyside Daycare has an intercom that is an animated duplicate of the one used by Wendy Torrance, and just just a few feet away is a tissue box that has the same pattern as the carpet I mentioned before. It's a lot of connections, and I just wish I knew why. In our number 7 spot today, we have this Disneyland invasion. In 1970, 750 hippies went to Disneyland and took over the Wilderness Fort. They passed out joints to other guests at the park and marched down Main Street singing a version of Zippity Doo-Dah that they had altered in order to be about the Vietnam War. Other people at the park began to sing America the Beautiful and tried to overpower them with their singing. This of course all got out of control, and eventually police in riot gear had to show up in order to defuse the situation and to keep it peaceful. Luckily, everything ended non-violently, and this is actually one of the only times that outside police ever had to handle a security issue at the parks. But this instance led to quite a rule at Disney parks. There was a strict dress code implemented that prevented long-haired hippies from being allowed to enter the parks. This is obviously not a great rule, and of course has since been abolished, because that would just be insane if that rule was still around in 2021. In our number 6 spot today, we have Hell's Bells. In 1929, Disney made a short film called Hell's Bells that was a part of the Silly Symphonies. While the Silly Symphonies seems like a fun, great time, Hell's Bells was a little less than silly or fun. It was basically just a short about hell, and the characters in it had different names, but they definitely depicted some of the most loved Disney characters. Honestly, the whole thing is pretty terrifying and really dark, and just totally off-brand for Disney. Satan and his demons have a wild party, and he feeds one of the demons to a character called Cerberus, who I'm pretty sure is actually the underworld version of Goofy. All in all, I think it's better that we just leave this one in 1929 where it belongs. In our number 5 spot today, we have this Disneyland dangerous metal. When Disneyland was being built in 1955, one of the main metals that was used was lead. This is insane since it's poisonous to humans. It just seems like someone would have caught this fatal flaw. Research has shown that prolonged exposure to lead can impact the reproductive and nervous system in really terrible ways, and it can also even cause cancer. If you're just taking a ride or two, it's probably not the worst thing in the world, but working at the park, especially if you're on the maintenance team, this could definitely have some extremely harmful side effects. Eventually, testing was done that found that the Peter Pan ride, the Haunted Mansion, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, and the Sword in the Stone statue, as well as even more, were containing high levels of lead. I'm not exactly sure what steps Disney has taken, if any, to correct this issue, but I do know that complaints were still being filed in 2011, so it'll be interesting to see if this was fixed 10 years later. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Disney World deaths. Disney World is the happiest place on Earth, or so they say, so it is always shocking to hear of anything bad happening there. Well, Disney World has been around for 56 years, so some less than great things are bound to happen. Unfortunately, at least 14 people have died at Disney World over its course. The reasons span from rides to accidents to pre-existing health conditions. Some of the people have been guests, while others have been backstage workers or cast members. It's definitely not the type of thing that we are used to hearing about a Disney park, since they of course like to keep their image as squeaky clean as possible, but hey, there are some things that are just unavoidable. In our number 3 spot today, we have this woman's rejection letter. The 1930s weren't exactly an ideal time to be a woman for a multitude of reasons, and one of them just happens to be the difficulty in finding employment. Women who applied to be animators at Disney Studios constantly found themselves being turned down because of the fact that they were women. One woman named Miss Frances Brewer was one of the many women who applied for a position, and this is the rejection letter that she received from Disney Studios. Women do not do any of the creative work in connection with preparing the cartoons for the screen, as that work is performed by young men. For this reason, girls are not considered for the training school. To qualify for the only work open to women, one must be well grounded in the use of pen and ink, and also of watercolor. The work to be done consists of tracing the characters on clear celluloid sheets with India ink and filling in the tracings on the reverse side with paint according to directions. With how far we've come from this time in America, it just feels so shocking to know that this was once the norm for women. In our number 2 spot today, we have this goldfish incident. Finding Nemo is an amazing movie and no one can convince me otherwise, but one thing I didn't know is the effect that it caused on goldfish everywhere. I know Nemo isn't a goldfish, but more people are buying goldfish as pets than they are buying clownfish. After the 2003 film came out, when kids saw the movie, they thought that by flushing their fish down the toilet, they would be sending them back to the ocean where they would be happier. It's truly noble in theory, but obviously most fish can't survive the flush, and if they do, they're headed to the sewage system, which will then end up taking them out regardless. It's truly the sweetest thing that all of these kids wanted to reunite their pets with their long-lost family, but who would have thought a Disney classic would lead to goldfish genocide? In our number 1 spot today, we have the problematic history. Most Disney movies instantly become popular because they are usually great, and having them come from a reputable source definitely doesn't hurt. There is one Disney movie from a while ago that you might have never heard of though, and it is called Song of the South. The movie follows a small boy who goes to visit his grandmother's plantation, where he meets a black man who they call Uncle Remus, who is a former slave, who was played by a man named James Baskett. Yep, that is unfortunately a real movie that was made by Disney, and the reason you may have never heard of it is because it is obviously super racist. What's worse is that the movie actually won an Academy Award for Best Song in 1947 for Zippity Doo-Dah. It's safe to say that this movie has since been buried, and it should definitely stay that way.
Number 10, The Rescuers, and the number 13. So, to ease into all of the scary truths, we are exploring a true fear that one of the main characters from The Rescuers has. Main Mouse Bernard has a fear of the number 13. The number 13 is commonly associated with bad luck in Western culture. When you go to a hotel, many don't have a 13th floor because they don't want to associate with bad luck. Bernard's fear is next level though, making it enough to be a phobia. Triskaidekaphobia to be exact. This is a written account of this fear, the number 13, dates back only to the late 1800s, but became common enough by 1911 that it got the name Triskaidekaphobia by combining the Greek word for 13 with phobia, which means a fear of. All in all, our boy Bernard from The Rescuers has some strong feelings about the number 13. Do you have strong feelings about any numbers too? Any particular ones? Also, I have another truth about The Rescuers, and this one was a bit of a scandal, so grab some tea and get ready to get into it. That brings us to number 9, The Rescuers Hidden Photo. Although the film came out in 1977 and was out on Laserdisc and VHS since 1992, no issue was found until 1999. The issue was with an objectionable background image about 38 minutes into the movie. This image was of a topless woman that was in 2 frames of the movie when Bianca and Bernard fly in on a sardine box on the back of Orville through the city. An important thing to note is that the frame rate for Disney movies is between 24 and 60 frames per second. So, only being visible for 2 frames means that the image was only visible for a 1/12 of a second, which is about 0.083 seconds. So, who broke the news about this if you could only find it by freeze framing at the right moment, knowing when that moment is? Disney did. That's right. They made a public statement about it, saying it must have been inserted in post-production and that they were recalling 3.4 million copies of the movie. That's a lot of VHS tapes. Could it have been a publicity stunt? I don't know. Number 8, Disney and recycling animations. This truth has been going around for a bit, but I wanted to include it because there's a bit of misinformation buzzing around it as well. If you look at the hand-drawn animated Disney movies, there can be some overlap in how some sequences turn out in the final production. For example, there's a movement in Robin Hood that looks an awful lot like some movement in Aristocats, and the dance scene in Beauty and the Beast looks the same as the one in Sleeping Beauty. This has led to a lot of outlets saying that the animators were recycling animation for either time or money, you know, all those reasons, and they kind of jumped to conclusions in some cases, because this wasn't always the case. In 2015, on his website Geek Dad, Jim McQuarrie asked former animators on these movies what really had happened in these situations. Animator Floyd Norman said it was because of director Wolfgang Wooly Reitherman. According to Norman, Reitherman liked to play it safe and only use stuff he knew would work, which led to similar animation over many of the movies he directed. Also, Gary Truesdale, co-director of Beauty and the Beast, said time was the reason for the dance scene making you see double, as they were kind of cut for time. Reitherman had already made it so that using previous sequences was alright. So Tuesdale said they resized and repositioned the Sleeping Beauty animation and then cleaned up the characters to make them look like the ones you see in Beauty and the Beast. And changed the colors too. This information was shocking to me, so I had to share it, and okay, I know it's not the spookiest, but the next few make up for that. Alright, that brings us to number 7. Finding Nemo and Other Lost Fish. In the movie, Nemo escapes the dentist down the toilet believing that all drains lead to the ocean. And this idea had influence. Children began flushing their fish down the toilet, believing this was true. The LA Times wrote about this and also what really happens to the fish when they are flushed down the toilet. Because no, they don't go to the ocean. First of all, most flushed fish die from trauma or shock from hitting fresh water if they're a saltwater fish. If a fish survives the swirling journey, they still won't make it to open waters though. They would end up in a sewage system where the bacteria, chemicals, and gases would poison or drown the fish with asphyxiation. But if somehow your fish was super strong somehow and they still would try, they still wouldn't make it because the only thing that makes it to open water is water. The fish would be taken out as a solid at a water treatment plant. So don't flush your fish, please, especially if they're alive. Alright, number 6. Princess and the Frog. 2 months after its release in 2010, an article came out in Metro that said young Disney fans had fallen ill after kissing frogs, like in the movie. This article was citing a salmonella outbreak in the States, but it wasn't known for certain that it was because of kissing frogs, so it's likely that this story was spun. That being said, there's truth in one part of it. Kissing frogs can give you salmonella. Amphibians are well known to carry salmonella and can give humans the infection salmonellosis from contact with them. It's advised young children don't mirror the princess and having a frog of their own because of their weakened immune systems, so just don't go around kissing frogs cause catch a bunch of stuff. Now let's jump from frogs back to fish, or half fish, that is. Brings us to number 5, The Little Mermaid, and The Little Mermaid song that was almost cut. We all know, regardless of how much you liked it, that The Little Mermaid is a classic. The thing is, it could have been released without its iconic song, Part of Your World, and that's terrifying. In a Polygon interview with Jodie Benson, the voice of Ariel, she said that in early test screenings the song didn't perform well, which is absurd. The 4-minute song wasn't doing well with its target audience, kids. The Disney chairman at the time, Jeffrey Katzenberg, noticed kids were getting restless and distracted during the song, even throwing popcorn around, and he wanted to axe the song. What saved this beautiful song was the song's lyricist, Howard Ashman, who apparently said, "If this song goes, I go." And to that I've gotta say, thank you, Howard Ashman, for an anthem. On to number 4, A Sleeping Beauty Truth. So, The Little Mermaid came out in 1989, 30 years after the last princess movie, Sleeping Beauty. And why? Well, Sleeping Beauty wasn't the only sleeping thing with this movie. The movie originally bombed. Called a sleeper movie because of its delayed profits and possibly because it put theatergoers to sleep, the movie originally only made $5.3 million. If you're looking at me like, Abby, what about inflation? Just stop there, kid. It cost $6 million to make the movie originally, so it originally came out as a loss. Now, though, it's nearly 10 times the original $5 million with a lifetime gross of $51.6 million. So it kind of grew from there. If you ever showcase something and it's not getting stellar reviews, don't sweat it, because Sleeping Beauty, it shows. People barely remember the truth that it bombed, so don't get too worked up about your own personal failures. Now let's go to another princess with number 3, Tangled's pricey truth. Adjusted for inflation, as I talked about earlier, Sleeping Beauty cost a little over $53 million with today's valuation, and that pales in comparison with Tangled. Tangled is the most expensive animated movie Disney has ever made. It's also the most expensive animated movie of all time. It is my favorite Disney movie though, so obviously it was worth it, you know. The studio spent an estimated $260 million back in 2010 to make Tangled. That's $250 million. Also, Ranker adjusted against 2019 inflation to say that it would be equivalent to $320 million today. And it's more expensive than the Titanic to make. And Titanic the movie, not the boat, I'm not sure about that. But why was it so expensive? Some people think it's because there was storyboarding and writing dating back to 2000, 10 years before the movie's release, but there are no sure answers out there right now. The good news, though, is Disney more than doubled their profit with a gross profit of over $590 million. Also, talking about profitable, let's jump to number 2, Frozen, and specifically Frozen names are references. Frozen's original title was going to be The Snow Queen, which is also the name of the work that the movie was based on. Pardon me here. Snedroganin, I hope I pronounced that right, aka The Snow Queen, was written by Hans Christian Anderson. When you think of that name, countless childhood stories may come into your head, but listen to it again. Hans Christian Andersen. Now, listen to 4 main characters in Frozen. Hans, Kristoff, Anna, Sven. Hans, Kristoff, Anna, Sven. Hans Christian Andersen. I rest my case. Also, the 4 names were confirmed on the Frozen IMDb to be a reference to the author. A little something snuck in there. Also, on another note, what's another thing characters Kristoff, Anna, and Sven have in common? No mothers. Which brings us to number 1, no mother characters. You may have noticed how a lot of Disney characters don't have mothers or parents, but specifically mothers. This could be because many Disney tales are based on old fairy tales where they too didn't have mothers or either parent, but this could also have been for other reasons, and Disney producer Don Hahn gave 2 more in an interview with Glamour. 2 more reasons, that is. The first reason Hahn said there wouldn't be any parents is because of plot. Most Disney movies are about growing up and accepting responsibility, and a quick way of doing that is losing your parent or both parents. An example he used was of Belle from Beauty and the Beast. She only had her father, and then her father was taken away, so she had to step up, grow up. The second explanation for no mother was because of Walt Disney's past. Walt's mother died tragically in a house that Walt bought for his parents. A carbon monoxide leak from the furnace hospitalized his father and led to his mother's death. Walt Disney was traumatized and felt personally responsible. From there, Hahn says that's why Walt steered away from mother characters in future films. I know that last one was sad, but it's important to know that it wasn't Walt's fault, and regardless of the tragedy that happened, he has and continues to impact many lives with his stories of growth.
In our number 10 spot, we have Finding Nemo, the 5 stages of grief. A large community on Reddit was shocked to hear of one person's theory about the infamous Disney movie Finding Nemo. The user concluded that the movie was demonstrating the 5 stages of grief. The theory is that Nemo actually died with his siblings and mother, and that Marlin imagines a single egg surviving, demonstrating the first stage of denial, where he refused to accept that the horrific event happened. Then it becomes anger when Nemo does anything even remotely dangerous. Then moves into bargaining, which Marlin does quite frequently on his quest to find Nemo. Then he eventually feels despair when he becomes ready to give up on the search. And then comes acceptance, where he finally is at peace and learns to not obsess over Nemo. I wouldn't put it past Disney to have at least developed the idea from this starting point. This theory feels pretty accurate to me. If you're liking this video so far, don't forget to smash that like button, as it will really help us out. In our number 9 spot, we have The Little Mermaid Hunter. In the original Little Mermaid, we learn that Ariel has a mother, but we never learn what happened to her until the 2008 movie The Little Mermaid: Ariel's Beginning. That is when we find out that Ariel's mother Athena was killed by a pirate ship, which is why King Triton hates humans. Well, perhaps you may have heard of another Disney tale with pirates called Peter Pan, and in this tale, Captain Hook, the villain of the story, is the captain of a pirate ship. We also see a group of mermaids in Peter Pan at Mermaid's Lagoon, and one of them looks an awful lot like Ariel, and she is even wearing a gold crown! Probably the queen. So that of course has led to the theory that it was Captain Hook's ship that killed Ariel's mother, and therefore Captain Hook killed her. That one blew my mind. In our number 8 spot, we have The Frozen Wisdom. I don't need to pray for this theory to be real or not, because it's awesome and it just deserved an honorable mention. People are convinced that the writers of Frozen 2 may have perhaps gone to a lot of therapy in their time, or worked with psychologists to help write the film, because the film is filled with the most amount of wisdom. The type of wisdom you only hear from your therapist. Just do the next right thing, Anna sings as she makes the horrible realization that her sister Elsa and her friend Olaf have passed away. Anna sings about the grief that she is feeling and describes a heaviness that only people that have truly suffered from depression would understand. She goes on to coach herself to do the next right thing, take one step at a time. The best piece of advice you could give someone when they're in the thick of it all. In another case, the people of Arendelle have to evacuate, and after the chaos, Olaf lets all all of the young ones play with him and stick icicles in him. He says to them, "We call this controlling what you can when things feel out of control." Another wonderful piece of advice. In our number 7 spot, we have Peter Pan, the psychopath. Now, we all know that Neverland is a place where you never have to grow up and you can be a kid forever. And that's all Peter wants for his friends, whether you're a lost boy or a darling. Sure, fun and games all day sounds amazing. But what if you get tired of childhood and decide it's time to grow up? Well, this theory suggests that Peter doesn't take too kindly to adults, even if they started off as friends. In fact, he hates adults so much that he wants to kill them. There are few adults in the movie, the main ones we see being Captain Hook and the crew of the Jolly Roger, and we know how much Peter hates them, so what if the Lost Boys decided it's time to become lost men? Well, following this theory, Peter kills any of the Lost Boys who try to grow up and finds new ones to take their place, so he has friends to play with forever. Captain Hook was actually one of the Lost Boys in the past and learned the truth of who or what Peter is and escapes, rescuing others as he does, and they grow up into the crew. Ooh, this is why Hook hates Pan so much, so maybe Hook wasn't the villain after all. In our number 6 spot, we have a scorned lover. Ooh, this is a juicy fan theory that honestly feels like whomever came up with it must have also known the pain of being betrayed. The theory is around the movie The Beauty and the Beast, and the theory goes that the witch or enchantress that had created the curse that turned the prince into the beast and all of his royal courtiers into what are usually inanimate objects did so because she was a lover scorned. She and the beast were former lovers, and he dismissed her once he got bored of her, which is something that royals were known to do in the past. The courtiers also would have treated her badly because they are loyal to the prince, so she placed a curse on them to teach them a lesson about respecting women. I see it. It makes more sense than a witch trapping the whole house just because the prince was prideful. There was clearly a deeper lesson afoot. In our number 5 spot, we have Eeyore's origin. Eeyore, everyone's favorite depressed donkey. While everyone in the 100-acre wood is usually pretty carefree and happy, Eeyore seems to always be in a bad mood, and I would be too if my tail kept getting lost or stolen and my house collapsed all the time. But some theorists think that there is a more sinister reason for the gloomy nature. But for that, we need to go all the way back to the 1940s movie Pinocchio. In the film, our puppet protagonist becomes a real boy, and after some wild adventuring, he is rewarded with a trip to Pleasure Island, a land where you can do anything you want and no grown-ups can stop you. But there is a curse placed on the island, and anyone who indulges is turned into a donkey. And we see in the movie that many of the donkeys can still talk. So the theory suggests that Eeyore was once a real boy, and he made the mistake of going to Pleasure Island and was cursed to take his more furry form. But it seems he managed to escape to the safety of the 100-acre wood, and now he lives out the rest of his days longing to regain his lost humanity. In our number 4 spot, we have Moana died. This is yet another very interesting and thought out theory around the movie Moana. In the beginning of the movie, Moana is on her boat stuck in a thunderstorm when the boat was struck by lightning. It is theorized that she died on the boat, which is most likely what would happen to any living being. The theory is expanded to state that Moana's spirit is completing the quest for the rest of the journey, and that is why she only meets gods and spirits the rest of the way. She is on their plane of existence. Then the theorist went on to state that after she finishes her quest, her spirit goes back into her body, and that is when she goes back to her island. Ooh, I bet you that some of these Reddit theorists are really just Disney employees, just, revealing secrets that they could only reveal anonymously. In our number 3 spot, we have The Fly. In the movie The Emperor's New Groove, Yzma has all sorts of potions to turn people into any animal you can think of, and she turns Kuzco into a llama. But I'm sure this isn't the only time she's done something like this. While most of the animals in the movie can't be understood by humans, like the squirrel only being able to communicate to Kronk through squeaks and gestures, there are obviously animals that can talk. Kuzco as the llama, Yzma as a cat, and there is one other strange example that throws the whole world of the film for a loop: the fly stuck in the spider's web. While walking in the forest, Kuzco sees a fly trapped in a web, and it is yelling out for help.
but it's devoured quickly. Now, while this is an obvious reference to the 1958's The Fly, it also begs the question of who else has Yzma turned into animals. Was this one of Kuzco's once loyal subjects? And are there other jungle creatures who used to be humans out there? Let's hope they at least got to be better ones than a fly. In our number 2 spot, we have the evil trolls. Okay, here's another Frozen theory for you. What if Prince Hans wasn't actually evil? What if he was manipulated by magic? A lot of fans online thought that Prince Hans, who had a plot twist of being the overarching villain of the story, was a little out of left field. He was seemingly so good for most of the story, and then all of a sudden he was evil. Well, one Reddit user had a very good theory on this. The trolls, who are a part of Kristoff's family, have some very rare magic, and as they have Kristoff's best interests at heart, perhaps they used magic to change Anna and Hans's path and turn Hans evil so that Kristoff could end up with Anna. Arguably, it's probably for the best, as she actually had a friendship with Kristoff, and all she knew about Prince Hans was that they had a few things in common, like chocolate and sandwiches. Not a solid basis for a lasting relationship, but still, perhaps the trolls altered Anna and Prince Hans's path, and they are the true villains of the story. And finally, we reach our number 1 spot, Walt's mom. Walt Disney, of course. Ever wonder why none of the princesses or main characters in Disney movies seem to have mothers? Or at least ones who are still alive? I mean, Cinderella, Bambi, Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, the list goes on and on. Well, some think that this is actually related to a terrible tragedy in the Disney family. In 1937, Walt and his brother Roy bought their parents a house with their newfound success, a dream for anyone. But unfortunately, this would be a terrible mistake. One day, their mother Flora called Walt to complain that their furnace was leaking gas. Walt sent some folks from the studio over to fix it, and they did, or so they thought. The next morning, the housekeeper returned to find Mr. and Mrs. Disney unconscious and dragged them out into the front lawn. Their father was taken to a hospital and survived, but unfortunately their mother passed away at the scene. This tragedy was well known by those who worked at the studio, and many thought that it affected the stories they told going forward, that Walt was so traumatized that he passed the trauma onto the characters in the films as a way to move on himself. Either way, it's interesting to look into the man who created an empire.